Welcome to the Clock Hour. I am your host, Marv Kennel, and today we have a very special guest. I always say that anyway, because all my guests are special. We got Mr. Bob back on part two of our last conversation. Glad to have you back. This time I got a few questions I want you to tap into, so we're gonna get right to it, because I only got a little time span. All right, Bob, how you doing anyway?
I'm doing well. Good to see you again, and it's nice to be a
Same,
part two.
same here, man. You know why? Because I know that you have a lot of information, a lot of things to talk about. But someone had, watched the show and they wanted to interject a couple of questions for you and see what you thought on different ideas. I think I sent those to you ahead of time anyway.
Sure.
But we're going to go right into them. Without getting political, what do you think of the agency today?
Okay. It's a great question, by the way.
Right.
Back in the mid '90s, the FBI changed their management policy. It used to be where, in order to become a supervisor in the FBI, you had to have a lot of time in and a lot of experience. You had to be an excellent investigator. Then, in the late '90s, they changed the policy and they made it where you could split. After 2 years, you could decide whether you wanted to go administrative, wanted to go investigative. And what occurred was in the early 2000s, the FBI started to get supervisors that only had about 2.5 years in and didn't really have much experience on the street. So what's occurred since, like, I would say, 2005 is steadily every year, the FBI loses supervisors that are competent, but they only have these young guys that have never really gone out in the field, done, you know, serious investigation, and now they're turning around and they're in senior agents who have 20 years in. So, dichotomy is off. Like, um, the continuity is gone. When an agent brings forward like a very good complex idea for an operation, especially in the area I work, counterintelligence, you're bringing it to like baby agent. Ever work cases and tend to only worry about covering their own ass, my language. And, you know, if you look at my case, that's kind of how I got jammed up. My supervisor was, just not up to snuff compared to what I was trying to pull off investigatively. And, it got ugly. So I guess the answer is um, we're not the blue collar uh, street agent type of agency anymore. Kind of like the Harvard, Yale, snooty supervisors who are, management driven and are trying to go up the ranks. That's not how it used to be. And that doesn't really work in investigations out in the street, especially when a lot of the liaison work with law enforcement agencies. You know, if you don't fit into like the top mold, then
Right.
street cops aren't going to want to deal with it.
Right. That's like where I come from. Um, there was a time where you had to have the seniority to get different posts and stuff like that. So you basically waited your turn. That's the
Right.
generation I came from. But there's the generation that came after us in like the 2000s, like you said, that was like, wait a minute, why I can't have that that particular post, or I can't do that particular job. You don't have the experience. That's generational to me. But I saw it, and then you see certain ones that they promote based on whatever. not real experience. When I came in the bureau, I played dumb. And I was taught it's easy for a wise man to play a fool. It's impossible for a fool to play wise man because I had state experience. So when I got there, it was different because you had this little guy, he would put on his uniform and he became the best thing since sliced bread. What did you see any of that while you were there?
While I
Did
was incarcerated or
Yeah,
while I worked?
the so-called cops, as they all call them, the cops, that their egos took form when they put the uniform on.
Well, if we're talking about my time in prison,
Right.
it's kind of comical because I had a captain once pull me up to his office, and you probably know the guy. And he basically said to me, "Hey, listen, he used to be, Mr. High and Mighty FBI agent now, but now you're nothing but inmate 919-12054, and you used to be a GS 14. Now you're not making any more than 12 cents an hour. So, you know, get it straight where you are now." And I was like, kind of like taken back. I was like, there was no
Right.
need. I mean, I was already humble. It wasn't like I was, trying to ask for favors or,
Right.
you know, any kind of situation like that. But what it was is he just needed to like stick his chest out and pound on it like a gorilla and let me know that he was the boss now. And, you know, I saw a lot of young guys who had no respect for the older COs
Right.
and didn't know how to deal with people.
Right.
You can make it, a comfortable situation for everybody as a
Yeah.
CO if you know how to deal with people.
I
And
did.
a lot of these younger COs, you know,
Right.
instead of trying to make things better, they felt like they had to get those stats so they could go to SIS. Like they wanted to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I tossed that guy's locker, and this is what I found," or "I found these guys in the yard, and the guy dropped a cell phone," or whatever.
Right.
Where it's like an older CO isn't gonna, make a big deal about something like that if it's gonna cause problems on the yard.
Right. And
So
my thing was, I got this much time and I retire. So I got to make it easy because it was all women when I started there,
right,
all women. So it was a unique environment. So I was scared half the time. Put it like that, scared,
right.
because there was that fine line, and it was easy for them to say he did something or she did something, you know. So I was just wondering what your take on it. And it says one of the other questions after your experience on the opposite side of uh, of that law, what can you say or hope for prison reform?
Okay, so, and again, that's another great question. The problem I have with is prison reform deals with people that are already incarcerated, and it deals with improving the living conditions of inmates. What I feel we need is moratorium on building new prisons because, like I always say, if you cut the head of the snake off, you don't have to feed it anymore. The more prisons we build, the more inmates we need. Literally, we need to fill those places that they're building. So if we can stop building new prisons, then perhaps it'll, cut down on uh, a median incarceration, and maybe it'll turn to some like decarceration, which to me means, you know, in lieu of taking someone who was high when they committed a crime and throwing them in federal prison. How about we throw them into a federal drug program before we have to incarcerate? Um, those are the changes I think need to take place before we put in new ping pong tables or have longer visits with families. I mean, all those things are important to me, but I think we need to start from the beginning before we open the door of the prison and work on what's outside that prison. And then also, the one thing I noticed, I'll tell you, Mark, and it was the most disheartening thing of all, is there's no such thing as rehabilitation. There's the programs are like backwards. Like when I was at, Danbury, people were taking classes like how to get their driver's license. When I was at the camp, people were taking classes like Viking history. To me, it made more sense to have the how to get a social security card, how to get a driver's license, how to do a resume. That should all be done at the camp,
Right,
not a medium or a low when guys still have a bid left,
right,
you know? And, the BOP does the best it can, but I just think that if there is going to be reform and it has to be within the institutions, I think the most important thing is programming and matching the programming with the level of security. Meaning, like, if you're at a UPS, let's have victims in. If
right,
you're low, let's have educational counseling. When you get to a camp, it should all be about, assimilating back to society.
right. I ran the food service culinary, the
Oh
food
yeah,
service program for the camp in Danbury. I made sure, certain people got in there and got their lessons and stuff, and that's who wrote those questions. One of my colleagues, I
oh really?
retired with, he sent me those questions because he watched the show, and
Right.
he said, I want more from him. I said, I'm not into the controversy, but I open the mic for you to speak about whatever it is you want to getting your point across. You know what I mean? Um, that's why we looked at those questions. I looked at them. I was like, okay, we could do that, and I sent them to you. I said, it makes sense. But as you said, that it's like in reverse. Your driver's license on at the FCI or medium, and then But I always tried to help while I was there. If someone needed some information or something, I'd pull it up or I'd send them who they needed to go to. But a lot of times, like you said, it needs restructuring.
But you see,
And
to your point right there, like, not to use the word old,
right,
that's like an old guy thing.
right,
Like you you were in there and you knew what your job entailed and you tried to help people that showed you respect.
right,
The younger guys, and I think this goes all the way across law enforcement,
right,
the younger guys worry about themselves. And the younger guys were the ones who were flipping lockers, who were busting people's chops coming out of the kitchen,
right,
who were doing things to disrupt the inter society that goes on in like a prison, whether it's like books of stamps, mackerels,
right,
whatever the quote unquote currency might be, um, whether it's a card game here or they're betting on a floor hockey game here.
right,
There's certain things that if you try to stick a pin in the balloon too much, eventually that balloon's going to burst.
right,
And you just don't want that. The older guys, you guys knew how to handle this. You
Right.
knew how to handle guys that were incarcerated, and everybody got along. The bottom line was, look, the attitude was like, don't snow the snowman. Like, don't try to pull over on a CO who's already giving you a couple inches. Don't try to grab a foot,
Right.
because then it's all going to get shut down. But
Right.
as long as you're only taking inches at a time, the inches that the COs are given, everybody's going to get along, and that inter society that's within those prison walls or fences or gates or whatever it might be,
Right.
you know, it will go on daily, day to day, without some horrible problems.
Right. And I used to tell some of the new guys, I said, listen, don't let the uniform make you who you are.
That's great. Yep.
Even in the military. I'm ex-Navy, so don't and I used to look at it, don't let the uniform make you who you are. Whoever you are, you put the uniform on top of it and be yourself. It's easier to be yourself than it is to, you know, because if we make things hard, y'all make things hard, then your job's hard. I like to come in and go home after 8 hours. That's it. Good food, and by me being food service, I didn't want people to eat nothing that I wouldn't eat myself. So I used to sit down and eat with people, and just listen to the conversations and stuff like that, just so I know, get a better understanding of what's going on.
And
And I,
your point, I don't mean to interrupt, but your
uh-huh,
point about you know being the man that you are when you walk in and you walk out. Don't let that uniform change it. To be open as I can be with people and hope that someone might hear and stop what they're doing. The reason I was incarcerated was because I started to believe the hype about me.
right,
I was federal law enforcement officer of the year. I was winning all kinds of awards. And instead of remembering who I was, I let my ego kill my soul.
right.
When that happened, I lost my moral compass and made the decision I should have never made.
I
If
understand.
I had listened to my soul rather than my ego, and if I had listened to my wife, I would have never got into a jam. But because, like you said, I didn't learn that lesson, and I started to, open up my creds where it says FBI or CIA, and I started to believe all that.
Yeah.
Uh, that's where it all came tumbling down.
Short story. I was coming from DR a few years ago, and I was coming through Philly, and when you got to go through the customs and the checkpoint, and the gentleman, he said, "Let me see that." I put him in, put my credentials out. He was like, "Why didn't you say you was one of us?" And he said, "Come on." I said, "Well, I don't usually use that to, basically identify myself. If it'll help me get out of a situation, yeah, I'm gonna use it.
Yeah,
Because I got kicked off a flight one year. So when I pulled that out, they started apologizing. I said, look, I ain't here to make no waves or nothing,
right.
but he's like, you ain't tell me you was a brother, man. Come on, he's one of us. Let's go. And he shuffled me through customs, and I was good. And I appreciate him, whoever he was. I forget his name and everything, but you know, there was a time and a place, I thought, for everything. Like I was in the Bronx one year also, and I saw the cop, but I didn't think he was trying to pull me over. So he pulls me over. He's yelling and screaming. I just left the dentist. He's yelling and screaming. What you doing here? Why you over here? I've seen you over here all the time. I said, no, you haven't. I go to the dentist up the street. I got gauze all in my mouth. So told him, wait a minute. So then I pulled out my credentials and driver's license form, and he said, is this you? And I said, yeah. He took it and threw it in my lap. Have a nice day.
Yeah, I mean, for safety reasons, if I ever got pulled over, I would open it up right away because I was armed,
Right,
and I didn't want them to see, glance and see a weapon, or
right,
and not understand that like legally I was, allowed to have it. There wasn't going to be any kind of altercation.
right.
But I, there were times where you can see agents, not myself really, agents using it to their advantage.
Right.
I
I
kind of just, I kind of just fell into the trap, like I said, where my ego, took away my soul.
but you know what happened it it gave you a different perspective, a different take on life. That's what would you say that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, as you know, and a lot of people don't understand in the outside world, is the respect when you're in prison. It's all about respect. It's all
Right,
about being humble. But the respect is kind of different. And for me going in, I was already kind of behind the eight ball. I mean, the rules are basically, no sex offenders, no rats, no cops are in the TV. Well, I had a couple altercations when I first got in, and I handled it one way. And when I got to Danbury that first day, I handled it one way, and then I realized, I can't do this all the time like this. So I
right,
said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make everybody realize how humble I am now.
right,
So I started to clean the showers and the toilets because, as you know, your unit gets released to chow based on how you do an inspection.
right,
And I was in a unit that was coming in last every time. So I busted my hump in those showers and in those bathrooms. And the unit, in the beginning, my fellow inmates would trash the place just because they knew, oh, how the FBI guy's got to clean the toilets, so let's make it worse,
right,
after it's done. And they were just testing me to see if I was being truthful, if I was really humble, or it was just a show.
right.
But I showed them, and I kept doing it, and I got guys to help me, and it became a big thing, and we got it. We came in first like every weekend. So
What?
the shot callers, the guys,
Yeah.
they came to me. They're like, "Look, dude, you come on in here because you're the reason we're all eating well now, and you're changing our view of like what a cop is."
Right.
Like, so a funny story is, towards the end of my bid at Danbury, I was the head recreation clerk.
Okay.
The COs I was working with, one of them retired. And I was playing floor hockey, and I was playing goalie, and I was asked to play goalie by like what they call the Italian team, which is
Right.
like guys that were in for like organized crime. So they came to me and they're like, "Yo, you want to be our goalie?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm an FBI agent." Like, they're like, "Yeah, but you're a damn good goalie." I was like, "Oh, okay." So at one point, you got an FBI guy being a goalie for a floor hockey team that was made up of all like Bob guys. It was
Right.
crazy. It was crazy.
And I spoke to a couple people about you, and they was like, yeah, 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 he cool, yeah, yeah, you know, and most of the time, even by us being, I was being in food service, certain people would come through and speak to my head cook. They would speak to him. I'd be like, how do you know all these people? He's like,
Yeah.
man, I just do. It's a respect thing.
Oh, totally. And look, the bottom line is if the people on the outside had the same amount of respect as the people on the inside
Right.
have, there wouldn't be anybody on the inside
Nope.
because the whole dichotomy of society would be a little bit different and a little kinder.
Yeah.
People think that like inside a prison is this like big horrible, oh my God, number one, you're gonna get raped. Number
Yeah.
two, you're gonna get beat up. Look, you
It's
might
respect.
get tested that first time, if you're, in from law enforcement or if you're a sex offender or a rat.
Right.
But once you prove that you respect everybody and that you're humble,
Right.
the respect you get back. I mean, we have a mutual friend.
Yep.
I mean, I consider him like family, like he's family to me.
Right.
And when you look at where he came from and you look at where I came from, you would never think
Couldn't put
that
the two
we
and
end
two
up
together.
being, like we'd never be best friends.
Right. And that's
And
that's my guy, man.
yeah, me too.
A
Me
lot of
too.
respect for him, and he was young. And you know what I always did was watch. And I was like, how do all these dudes come in here and speak to you? They come in, hey, hey, hey. I'm like, so in my mind, I'm like, that that goes on what you put out. You know
I
what I
agree.
mean? What you put out. If you put out respect, you're gonna get respect. Somebody told me they sat down and gave me my credibility. But I gotta end this one again. Bob,
Oh,
I love talking to you, man. So,
same here.
I, it's always a pleasure, and we're gonna have to go part 3 because we could sit and talk all day.
Listen, I really enjoy it, and I hope that look, my dad always said that you know a man's success is not based on how much money he touches, but by how many lives. You're a success. You're changing people's views. You're making people's lives a lot better. I appreciate you and people like you that give us, the respect and the opportunity to help when we can.
Right. Same here. Same here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Sky as always, and my man Big Al behind the boards and letting me know I'm talking too much. But tune in for the next episode to the Clock Hour. Thank you.